Well, all right, here we go. Active Directory. So this is, oh man, I had it up and then I didn't. So really what we're trying to do is tie up all the stuff that we had, that we have already with Active Directory. So the idea with this is that we want everything to be flowing through Active Directory as far as authentication goes, as far as policies go. We're going to do a couple of policies as well. Just kind of everything in general. So here's what we got. And I really need you guys to not skip this step. Remove the DNS role. I know that seems counterintuitive, but it's important. When you install Active Directory, it requires probably a good 12 to 15 DNS records that, if they are not there, Active Directory, or really just LDAP in general, will not work. So instead of making you guys slog through manually creating every single one of these, we're just going to let Active Directory do it. So, step one, undo all the work that you've done, essentially anyway. So we'll start here. Remove roles. Let's get rid of DNS. Now, this is also going to fix another problem that you may have noticed you had. Look in the bottom here, no internet access, right? And that's because, before we go and do that, take a look here. Your DNS server is still set to .1, and in my case, that's pfSense. And I would imagine that it's the same for you because we all static IP address these servers. If you didn't, now's a good time to fix that. But because it's looking at pfSense for DNS, it's never going to work because we turned that off. So that is, if you're getting that and you're in the same boat that I am, it's looking at pfSense, that's going to be the issue. So you can update that to your own IP address because you are now running a DNS server, and it'll work, at least temporarily. But when we remove the DNS role and then reinstall it, Windows is going to put in there 127.0.0.1 for you. Now, if you don't remember, that is the loopback address, which means me. Whatever server you put that on, that means that server, that same exact server. So it's looking at itself for DNS resolution, and that will still work. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Anyway, so uncheck DNS, next, and here's the deal. Check that box because there will be a restart required. And then remove it. So if you have your Windows 10 box up and it is updated and did have internet and everything, it, at least temporarily, will not have internet. But the good thing about this is that our DHCP role will already be configured for all of this. We don't have to worry about any of it. And yeah, as well, we don't have to deal with all of the records that we're gonna have to create. And I'll show you. You don't even have to install DNS yourself. During the Active Directory process, if you guys remember how that goes, that will all happen for you automatically. Whoa, what have I done? Well, that's not good. Did I run out of memory? Huh, I may have. Come on. There you go. Shouldn't be a memory issue. I have 16 gigs, but whatever. If it boots up, it boots up. I'll be happy. Yeah, there we go. Now, if this server fully blows up and never behaves again, that's what I'm gonna blame it on. But it looked like it happened during while the VM state was fully off, so I think we're probably fine. Okay. We are back in. On the left-hand side, take a peek. Make sure DNS is no longer listed. Give it a sec, though. Oh, hey, look. It has to finish up. There we go. Okay, so you will know that it's no longer listed. Double check over here on the left-hand side. It's not there. Yeah, if you go to Tools, no DNS in the list. All right. Make sure I don't skip any steps. Oh, yeah. Step number 2, install ADDS. So, fairly easy to do. You want role-based. Pick the right server. Now, at this point, if you don't have a static IP address, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. So make doubly sure you have a static IP address. Go check it. You might be thinking, oh, yeah, no, I totally did. No, go check it. Actually check it. If you don't, you might run into some issues. So check it. Anyhow, Active Directory domain services, that's what you want. Next on that guy. The stuff that you need is going to get added in automatically, so you should be fine. And this is really just telling you things to know. Ensure that users can log on in case of a server outage, so you want 2 domain controllers. And then DNS. So we are kind of sidestepping this. What you really want to be doing in this case is doing this process twice. Have 2 servers. But as you saw, my server died. And I think that might have been a RAM issue. So running, 4, 5, 6 Windows servers on one single machine is already taxing enough. So that is the biggest reason why we're going to skip it. But the other reason is that I don't expect that you guys get a job and then have to immediately go and deploy Active Directory in a kind of fail-safe kind of way, like straight out of school or anything like that. A lot of times you're coming into situations where it's already deployed, so you don't necessarily have to worry about this too terribly much. Anyway, and then a DNS server has to be installed, right? This is the other thing. It's not going to find a DNS server, so it's going to install one for us. So for right now, I'll do the auto restarts because I'm not too worried about it. There's nothing open for me right now, but it's going to install all those goodies. I don't know this is the point where it reinstalls. I think it's after you promote it that it'll reinstall. But let that get done, and we'll be in good shape. There we go. That one's a fairly quick one. Take a look in the top area here. You get yourself a notification. It's like, hey, check this out. Yep, post deployment configuration. So you are not running Active Directory until you do this. So just for 100% sake, since we talked about it, what you really want to do in the case that you have, so like I have SVR01 here, let's say that's our main domain controller, and then we create another domain controller, right, for that failover that the notification was telling us a little while ago. You would do this option. Add a domain controller to an existing domain. You type in the domain, and in my case, that would be win.lchavez.io, right? And that's pretty much it. It's going to ask you for some credentials, like give me a domain admin that I can use to log into the domain and replicate and do all that kind of fun stuff. You'll provide that, hit next, and pretty much everything is taken care of for you because you will have already answered the questions that we're about to answer. So because we don't have a primary domain controller, a main domain controller, this is what we need to do. Add new forest. So in my case, win.lchavez.io. If you guys are using my name, you should probably not be doing that. And here it's poking around the network to make sure that this domain name is not used already by any resource. So that takes a little bit. It's checking over DNS, it's checking over NetBIOS, and it's checking over WINS. So if you're good, it just pops you over to the next window. But it's gonna this idea is gonna come back up here in just a minute. Now it's probing for general DNS servers. And at this point, there we go. All right. So if you are bringing a new server in, say your domain controller was on 2012 and you're bringing in a new domain controller that's on 2016 or something like that, you always have to use the lowest forest and domain functional level as your lowest server. So if you've got two domain controllers on 2012 and a new domain controller on 2016, you really can't do much about that. You're going to have to go down to 2012. But since ours is a new domain controller on a new domain in a new forest, we get to just say, all right, give me the latest and greatest. So in 2019, be the same exact situation where you would choose 2019, but if you had 2016 domain controllers, you might need to consider that you want to go down with that. Now, there are reasons, there are some situations where you want 2019. Like if you are preparing to decommission your server 2016s, you will want to bring it up to 2019. You want to choose 2019 here. The only real downside to choosing the higher functional levels with servers, with domain controllers that are still on lower versions, is that you will not get the new feature sets. And if you try to enable them in 2016 or force it from one of the newer servers, it will error out on you. So just be aware that the versions have to match functional levels and the versions of your server, 2016, 2012, 2019, whatever that is, for all of the features to work. If you move ahead to 2019 with 2016 servers still as domain controllers, you will be missing features, and Windows will not be shy about telling you that. So anyway, so in our case, leaving this alone is fine. DNS server, do not uncheck this box. Leave it alone. We need the DNS server back, and Active Directory is going to take care of it for us. So leave that alone. You have to have a global catalog. This is where everything that has to do with the domain is stored. It is like the database. All of your users, all of your policies, all of your everything is stored in the global catalog. This is why you cannot uncheck it. So. And then read-only domain controller. This is if you want, so say you have like a branch down the road that has a rickety server that is barely hanging on, that's doing domain controllers stuff. You want to turn it into a read-only domain controller. That way, if you try to make changes on that server, it will prevent you from doing it, right? Especially in a case where you may be co-located or something like that, where there are 3 other companies that work in this area, and you want to feel secure that even if someone shady were able to get a hold of that server and try to make changes or something like that, they still would not be able to because of the role, because it is a read-only domain controller, meaning even if you had the credentials, even if you could, it will not, your primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever domain controllers will not take those changes because it's coming from a read-only domain controller. So in this case, we can't even do that because we don't have a primary domain controller to try and change. So this option will only come up if you have a primary domain controller already installed on the network. Now, this last bit, directory services restore mode. This is your master password for the global catalog. So if you need to back up your directory and then redeploy it on a new system, you got to have this password. Otherwise, everything is encrypted and you'll never get into it. Well, I guess you could. I mean, let Amazon Web Services, you can like rent those Tesla video cards or whatever, and then just try to do password attacks against your directory services. That could be fun, but yeah, no. Don't forget this password. Write this password down. Do not type it on a computer, by the way. Write this password down with your hands and then store it in a safe behind a couple of locks, right? And only you and the other admin that should have access to the DSRM password have access to that safe, right? Lock and key, lock and key. So what this is saying is a delegation for the DNS server cannot be created. The whole reason that it's complaining about this right here is that there is no DNS server, right? We killed it. But because we have told it that we want to add the DNS server, what it's saying is the parent zone can't be found. So we're going to make it. That is what all that says. You don't have a DNS server. You don't have a parent domain or parent zone. So we are going to fix that for you. This is why you can't do anything on this window. So hit next. Here's where that NetBIOS and Win stuff comes in handy. So here's the deal. When you choose a domain, you are choosing your NetBIOS name. Where did that come from? Win, right? It is the leftmost choice on your fully qualified domain name that you gave it earlier. So if I just gave it lchavis.io, lchavis would have come up here. But because I gave it win.lchavis.io, it came up with win. You can change this. It is perfectly fine to do so. And you really kind of want to change it to something that people would remember. So short is best, right? Now, the deal with this, though, is that you need to know this. Your users need to know this. This is why you want to keep it short. Because there are local logins and domain logins. And if you're not sure which one you're doing, you can type it in so that it forces it. So what you want in this case is, say I want to log in as Leo on this domain, after we get it all done, of course. You'll type in win/Leo. And that is an explicit request to log in as the domain user Leo. If I just type in Leo, in the case that there is a Leo on the local machine, it will assume whatever was logged in last. So if it was a domain login last, it'll do the domain Leo. If it was a local login last, it'll assume local. So sometimes you just have to be explicit. Anyhow, long story short, this name is important, and it's the leftmost name that you gave in your fully qualified domain name. So that is important. Now this takes another bit of time because it has to probe again. It's going to double check. It's like, hey, in the time that you did this, did win get taken? So you typically don't want to move these unless you have a server that is dedicated to containing the database login sysvol folder. So these are basically, this is where your global catalog lives. This is where all the logs live. And this is where the basic configuration lives. So these are really important directories. You cannot lose these. But lucky for us, they don't really go anywhere. So there's nothing to really worry about or change here unless you have a secure storage for these directories otherwise. Sometimes, well, actually, not sometimes, a lot of times, people will have a secondary disk and store them there. But we won't make any changes to that. Now this, I think we're good here, right? Promote the server to a domain controller. DNS is checked. Review options. Here we go. Here's where we are. You want to view the script. So in that case, right, everything blew up. Your whole server's down. You didn't make a secondary one, so there's no replication. You have no idea what's going on, and you're panicking, and you need to get something up right now. This is the case. This is what you want to do. So in the summary, it tells you all the choices that you made, right? Click this button. This is quite literally a script that you can feed in to the Windows server, and it's like, oh, yeah, cool, I can do this. So it will make every single change that you had already created, that you had already done through that wizard process, and it'll just force it. So this is a quick way to go through that process all over again. So you want to take a screenshot of that, I think, is what I'm having y'all do. Yeah, take a screenshot of the script, and then finish the promotion and reboot. Finishing the promotion is here. It's going to yell at you a couple of ways. If for some reason you did not heed my 2 warnings of make sure your server is on DHCP, it will complain at you here. This is not a window that you want to next through. I mean, honestly, none of the windows are, but this one especially. This is going to break things if you don't heed the warnings here. That really is just one habit that every IT person needs to get in the habit of, is just reading the screen. Read it. I don't care if you've seen it 12 times. Read it anyway. So, anyway, so this is allow cryptography algorithms compatible with Windows NT 4. So really what we want is to make sure this is off. But that's what this is telling you. This is saying if you've got clients or other domain servers that are still using the NT4 standard, this is going to break it. That is a good thing in this case, though. We want the better cryptography. The other issue that it's complaining about is the delegation for the DNS, right? We were talking about that before. You don't have a DNS server, but Active Directory is going to install one for us, and it's going to create all the delegation and the parent zone and everything else. That's why. Otherwise, no action is required, right? Read that whole paragraph and you'll see why this is important. Otherwise, check completed. Everything's passed. We're good. If you get other errors than that, if you see any other error than that, stop and email me because you've done something very wrong. Or just go through the process again. Follow along with me. All right. Hit install. This is the part that does take a little bit. So sit tight. I throw these straight up onto YouTube. So, yeah, you might want to find your right arrow key and smack it a few times. I will try not to say anything too terribly important right during this process. I will take a break and drink some coffee. All right, it's going to reboot me. All right, so your installation may take a little bit longer than that, and that's okay. This very much depends on hard drive speed. So if you're not on an SSD, it'll take a bit longer than it did for me. So just be aware, take a break, use the restroom, grab a bite to eat. Yeah, no, that whole chestnut. Yeah, and if your equipment is faster than mine, you may already be done. That goes double for if you're running this on a desktop versus my laptop. Yeah, it makes a pretty big difference. Laptops can have a lot of power, but nothing beats a beefy desktop. If what you're looking for is raw horsepower, nothing beats a desktop. Yeah, they can be. Some are starting to come out with 8 cores, man. Like at that point, it's like, why do you even put a battery in there? It's not like you can get much power out of it. You're just gonna have to keep it plugged in the whole time. Just about. Just about reinstalling. This is why it's so important to get it right the first time. Not only will it waste your time, it's just annoying. Yeah, I did too. That snapshot. Make sure you do it. I mean, if you're at this point and you hadn't done it, whoops. Should be habit by now. I think the biggest issue here is that it's still on 2 gigs of RAM, so it's having to swap a lot. Oh, okay. Yeah, just let it go. It'll finish. That's what I was saying before we started the recording. We're gonna be waiting a bit. But then again, it's Windows. When do you not wait? Let's see. What else do we got? It shouldn't be too much after this. Okay, cool. Yeah. Mine shouldn't be too far behind. Hey, there it is. All right. Input, control, delete. I still haven't figured out what that is. It says host key, and then it looked like a delete key, but I don't have that key on my keyboard, so I have no idea what it's talking about. So I don't think I can do it with a hotkey, but you guys can. I think you can do right control and the delete key. So, and maybe that's it. I think it's actually the delete key, but I don't have one of those on this. So, yeah, control and delete. All right, so take a screenshot of this. Right, Win administrator. The administrator that you were using prior to this is absolutely important because you are now logging into a domain administrator as opposed to a local administrator. Very, very important. But it's the same user account. It just got promoted. So the password is the same. That's what I'm getting at. All right. You now have newfangled powers. And you are now a proper domain controller. So at this point, in the real world, if you don't have backups of this guy, you're in for a world of hurt if anything goes wrong. In our case, that's a snapshot. But I think it's another big reason why a lot of people run a lot of their servers on VMs as well. Snapshots and backups of VMs are dead easy to get done. You know, you guys have created an OVA before, OVA, the export of a VM, and you guys have taken snapshots before, so it's important to have that stuff. Anyhow, so the next step was go check on your DHCP role. If you're still running Windows 10 and you do a release renew right now, it will not work. It will not work. So this is what I was talking about reauthorizing roles. It is important that you go in here because if you take a look, you'll realize, look at that. Anytime you see red, probably not a good thing, right? This is what you want to do. You want to right-click on your server name. You want to authorize. And then you want to refresh. What is that? View file. Okay, it's F5, whatever it is. There it is. There you go. You should be getting your green check marks. That's the deal. Make sure that that's happening. Otherwise, your any client that you're trying to get an IP address on, well, it just won't happen. So make sure you got green check marks before you move on. I think I have you take a screenshot of that for me. Take screenshot, DHCP authorized. Yes. So now it's time to join Windows 10 to the new Active Directory domain. If I can find it, it's around here somewhere. There it is. All right. So the most important part about this is that DHCP is working. If you did this pretty quickly, then you might be in the situation where you have the old DHCP lease, which does have the correct information. But as long as DHCP is authorized, you should be okay as far as getting the IP addressing and the connectivity that you need. But do check on it. Do double check on it. Windows 10 always gets me all confused about where I need to go. It's like 4 extra clicks now, man. All right. So, oh shoot, and then I go to the wrong spot anyway. Details. Yeah. So IPv4 address, right? Still good there. Default gateway, DHCP server, DNS server. So this is the important part. Without this part, you will not be able to join the domain. You are literally asking the domain, can you tell me where win.lchavez.io is? If you have the wrong DNS server or if you have no DNS server, you'll never get an answer to that because your name, win.yourname.io, doesn't actually exist out in the real world. And if it does, well, you might be joining somebody else's domain. But I really don't think that's going to happen. All right. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So to do this, just type in domain. You get access worker school. And let me see. Connect. You know, and now that I think about it, this is a new version of Windows that I'm on. There it is. Okay. Whew. I was like, what is it going to ask me now? All right, so join a domain, win.lchavez.io. Should work. There we go. So it's assuming that you have the win already because you are explicitly connecting to that domain. So we haven't created any other users on the domain just yet. So we're going to use the domain administrator account. That'll give us authorization. Now, okay, so this is asking if you want to create an account locally with this same user account. You don't want to do that because if you're using the administrator account here, there's already an administrator account on the machine. So it will sync it up, I believe, but you can easily just skip this step as well. And I think in the lab itself, I have you skipping that step. And restart. All right. So while it's restarting, we can work on this, which is you need to create your accounts in Active Directory. I'd like you guys to take a look at Active Directory Administrative Center. In the past, I don't know how y'all have dealt with it as far as usernames and passwords and all that kind of thing, but there are a couple of ways to do it. Active Directory users and computers. This is the old way. This is the way that I mean, ever since like Windows 2000, this is how it's been done. And this is what I'm most used to. So I always have to get used to dealing with Active Directory Administrative Center. So this is the way that I would typically do it. It's actually way easier, I think, than the new way. But it is what it is. I'd like you guys to use ADAC because most new people that are getting onto Windows Server are shown only ADAC. So it's pretty important that you know. Nick and Ron, do you remember what y'all used last semester? Yeah, it's all a blur, huh? All right. But the cool thing about this is that if you go to tree view, it gives you something very similar to Active Directory users and computers. So this is usually what I do. I think there's you can do it this way as well through the list view, but it's what I'm used to, and they gave it to me. It's actually part of ADAC, so I'm going to use it. So what we want in this case is in users. I don't necessarily need you to put them in any specific place, I don't believe. Do I? First name, domain users. Nope, that's it. So we're just going to drop them in with everybody else. The focus here is not really user manipulation and OUs and all that stuff. Just get some in. All right, so I have you create, what do I say? One using your first initial last name and one using just your first name. So I'm creating this one first. The one with just your first name needs to be part of the domain admins group. Gotta have yourself a password. You want to undo this. If you set your password here, then you want to change that. You don't have to go with password never expires, but what you want to do is get away from this. Otherwise, as soon as you log in the first time, it's going to make you change it. But I don't want it to expire because I have really bad habits, you know. But again, that's not really the focus of this class. Y'all got hit with all that in the face last semester, so we can skip a little bit of that. The big thing that we want to do, though, is member of. This user is going to be special. If you just want your users to be part of domain users, if that is your intent, you can just hit OK right here. You're done. But if you want them to be in any other users, or any other groups, I'm sorry, you'll need to do that here. And you can get it all done in one go. So you can actually just hit enter here because it is what it is, but I always check names. That way, you know, if I typoed it, because that's quite possible, it will not underline. It'll tell you, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Go find it. But if you type it right, you're good. So domain admins, we are good. I think that's it. Yep. Hit OK. One user down, the other user to go. And the passwords do have to be complex. Microsoft complexity, what is that? 8 characters, 3 of the 4 of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. So be aware. And like I said, at this point, I just want this user in domain users. That's what I'm asking you to do. So you can just leave this alone, and that will just happen. Oh, wait. What happened? Oh. It doesn't like that my first and last name are the same. Look at that. Failed to create new object. Same name. So let's throw a J in there, see if that does it. Yay. So I've got admin me and non-admin me. If you do regular work on Active Directory, this is the whole reason why we're doing it this way. If you do regular work on the domain controller, you are going to need a separate account that you do that work with. For accounting purposes, number one, so we know who's who. But number two, so that as a normal user, you should be logging in as your non-administrative user 99 times out of 100. Right? The only time you should be using that administrative user is when you have to do administrative tasks. Surfing the web is not an administrative task. Right? Even if you plan on taking the research that you get from on the web and translating that into an administrative task, the web surfing part is still not an administrative task. So be aware, you should just log into your admin, run the command or two, or make the group policy change that you need, and then log out. Log back into your standard user, your regular domain user at that point. Okay, so now that we have our users, we can... Let me see. I don't guess I actually tell you guys to log in during the process. But if you want to test that your users have been created correctly, you can do so. So look at this. What I mentioned before, if the last login was a local login, it's going to try to do a local login. So you have to come down to other user. But look at that. It says win. We can do El Chavez. And check it. Look at that. I got my name too. Took my initial. Yay. Man, what a nightmare it would be if you had the same first, last name, and initial as somebody else. Active Directory will not allow that to happen. Yeah, exactly. So if y'all worked at the same company and y'all had Active Directory, you'd be in a... Somebody's going to have to compromise, man. Oh, okay. I think if his first name is different, then y'all are okay. But if you were both Nick, yeah, you would run into some issues. Anyway, so this is a totally new account. It's really kind of hard to tell, just simply because it looks the same, right? But if you change the background here and then log in locally, and I'll show you how to log in locally as well, because sometimes you just have to do that. I really don't like that background either, though. There we go. That'll work. It'll make a difference. So anyhow, so we are domain. You can check that you are domain by doing who am I. This, if you're logged into a domain, it'll have the last level of your fully qualified domain name there, /El Chavez, or really what you chose in the NetBIOS box earlier. That's the biggest thing. Make sure you are who you think you are. All right, so the last thing that we have is group policy objects. We need one policy. That's what we need. And we're going to want to disable guest. Now, here's the thing. Policies are policies are policies, but I want to torture you just a little bit. I haven't tortured y'all at all throughout this whole semester, and this is what this class was about, to be honest, when we taught it in the 4th semester. So the one thing that I'm going to have you guys do a little research on, is find the policy that will disable guest. There is absolutely no better practice for what group policy is going to be like than having to figure out where the policy actually is. Once you get into group policy, you'll see what I'm talking about. So we need to create a policy, and I'm just going to go in and create a policy. Doesn't really matter what it is overall, just so long as we have one. But you guys need to create the disable guest policy. So there is a policy, in-group policy, that will ensure that the guest accounts on machines are disabled. So this is to combat if there's a local administrator that just needs a couple people to get onto the computer real quick, and he enables the guest account. This policy will go behind him and disable that account again. So, even if for good reason, right? Like this computer is not that important or whatever, but we just need it to be taken care of. Someone needs to log in real quick or something like that. You can enable the guest, but just to be sure that as an admin, you do not make the mistake of leaving the guest account on, this policy will run behind you and disable it again. But it doesn't happen until you log out and then log back in. So if the guest just remains logged in for like ever, it won't happen until you reboot it, until like updates happen and it gets rebooted. So anyway, group policy management. There is no fancy way to do this yet. It does look like the old style. So here's where you want to be. Domains, win.lchavez.io. Do not, unless you are changing the policies that already exist in default domain policy, unless you are changing those policies, do not edit this policy. Speaking of world of hurt, this is another one of those situations where you'll be in a world of hurt. If you take a look under settings, these are the policies that are already created in the default domain policies, right? If you're going to come in and say minimum password length should be 12 now, cool. Edit that in the default domain policy. If you want to, shrink this down to maybe just 2 or 3, but increase these a little bit, cool. Do that in the default domain policy. If you are adding things, do not add them to the default domain policy. If you remember from your Network Directory Services class, you come here. You create new ones in here. So, right-click, new. Let's call it, you shouldn't call it test policy. You should call it the disable guest or something similar to that, so that you know what what you're talking about. You always want to name your policies what they do. So if you're disabling the guest account, then it probably should say that. And you should probably only have policies related to that name in this object. Right? So don't go in and configure your update policy within your disable guest policy. Come in here, create a new policy object, configure your updates in that policy object, and then link it then. What you're really trying to do in this scenario is create the rules of your network, right? Create the rules of the Windows machines. But keep in mind that you want to sometimes disable those rules or change those rules. And if you have one massive policy that has all of the different things, you are not able to just go in and unlink them. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this test policy doesn't have any policies linked to it, so it's not dangerous to do this. So test policy, right? Let's say I've got it configured. You come up here, you link a GPO. Oh, by the way, none of these policies are red, not in this directory. When you link them, see that little arrow? That is when the domain will apply them. That's when the directory controller will apply them to people that log in. So when you link it, It shows up here, test policy. Now it is enabled. By the way, that option does not do what you think it does. When a policy is not applying, you don't come in here and just say enforced and it automatically magically applies. That's not what that works. That's not how that works. This is if there are two conflicting policies. Let's say there's an enable guest policy and a disable guest policy, and you don't want to work with inheritance, you just want to force one. This is how you do it. If you've got an enable and a disable, and you want the disable to win, you come in and enforce the disable policy. Again, this is another reason why you want to separate out your policies. If you have them in the same policy, you don't have the granularity to be able to come in and say enforce this or don't enforce that, or, that kind of thing. So if I see padlocks, I'm just going to shake my head. See, enforced padlock, because it doesn't do what you think it does. And that also that will also tell me that you didn't watch the video. Anyway, so for now, I'm going to delete the link. While you edit it, it should not be linked. All right. So when you come into settings, you can see nothing. There's nothing in here. When you want to edit the policy, you right-click on it, you hit edit, and you find yourself some policies. Right? So in this policy, oh, cool. Prevent changing lock screen and log on image. That's what I'm going to do. Sounds good. But you can see, I mean, these policies actually are quite broad. You can do a ton of different stuff. Right? I mean, even as far down as just the colors that you want people to see. If your company is red and green, you can come in and enforce that stuff. Right? If you don't want people to log in by their faces, right here, disable the camera on login. Right? So I can do multiple policies here because they are all related. These are lock screen policies. But you can break them down, right? Sometimes you want some, sometimes you want another. If in the case of we're bringing in 100 people that don't actually work here, we don't want the face camera to be on, you might want to separate that one out so you can turn it on when those people come to your business and then remove it when they leave. Right? So anyway, so we got that policy. Cool. If we come in here and refresh this, come on, refresh. You'll see now. You have these, right? Cannot change this, and the camera will not enable. Now what we'll do is we'll link it to the domain. Test policy. Okay. Right, and remember, y'all aren't enabling the policies that I'm showing you right now. You are enabling the disable guest policy. So don't submit me this exact screenshot. But link it. Right? So anybody that authenticates, anybody that authenticates is going to get this policy forced on them. And that is for everybody in this domain. So everybody that authenticates in this domain gets the policy. All right. So for us, so you can do this a couple different ways. You can, Reboot typically does it, forces a GP update, and then you can also force it in the command line. I'm afraid it's going to try and update on me if I do that. So what I'm going to do is just GP. Oh, wait, I'm not even going to check this out. We're going to have to do a administrator. And you want to give it the domain admin. You need to put, oh, by the way, let me just show you because this is gonna get some of you guys. Oh, it doesn't do it. Oh, cool. I think it's because the administrator is disabled on this machine. Cool. Okay, never mind. Typically, if you type in a a user that is also on the local machine, it will default to the local machine. So you need to pay attention down here. If it says domain anything but your actual domain, then you need to fix it by throwing the NetBIOS name up here, doing it like that. But looks like that's not the case, so we're good. All right, so GP update force will force the machine to pull down any policy changes that has happened since the last login. And there we go. You should be getting a string of successes, and you are good. Now, to make sure that they are applied, you want to sign out and sign back in. Ensure you are who you think you are. Make sure you're in a domain account, because if you are not, it will not work. You might even get a flash when it says welcome, depending on how fast it logs in. You might even get a flash of applying group policy. But do you see what I'm doing, right? I'm logging into my regular account, and then when I need to do an admin thing, I log into the admin account as needed, and then I close this window when I'm done. Was it GP result R? Yeah, GP result R. So GP result /R does not have, oh, wait. Oh, you know what? I need to pass my Leo. So because the administrator here is not your regular, it's not a normal user. It doesn't have that kind of power to run that. So we'll want to do this with our regular user. There we go. It may still yell at me here because I've not logged into that user on this computer. Yeah, same deal. All right, let me log in to my Leo user. Just make sure it says win down there if you're going to use those accounts that are similar to the ones that you already had on the machine, the local ones. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly why it's complaining about that, because I had not logged in, so it doesn't have a profile for me. So it's like, I don't know what kind of policies are applied to you, man. You never logged in. You have no, there are no policies, technically. Now let's see if it behaves. Yay, it's behaving. All right, this is really what I wanted. There. So what we're looking for is, there's a correlation here. We came in to our test policy. Let's edit this guy, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Where did you make those changes? It was under computer configuration, Windows settings, or something like that. No, software. Nope, must have been under preferences. I don't even know where I went. So let me show you. Here's how you figure it out. Settings, and then it tells you. Computer configuration, policies, administrative templates, control panel, personalization. So let's go there. Just to finish that thought, I don't actually have to do that, but you will run into this. So policies, administrative templates, right? Control panel personalization. And there it is. Okay, so this is where I went and configured those policies. That's kind of beside the point, but I wanted to finish that thought for you. Look, computer configuration. That's where this policy is configured. So in your GP result, you're going to want to look for computer settings, right? Because there's also a, oh, where'd it go? Oh, there's also a user configuration. Any policies that are affected there, will show up under user settings. So, since my stuff is under computer settings, look at applied group policy objects. Ta-da! If your policy does not show up here, it is broken. You have to fix it. Go fix it. Something went wrong. You didn't link it. You didn't configure the policy correctly. You didn't GP update force. You didn't sign out. You didn't sign in. There are a few things, a handful of things that can affect this. If in doubt, just reboot it, not the server. You don't need to reboot the server. Reboot your Windows 10. After that, give it another shot. Sometimes it takes a little time for the policy to actually flow down. That's why we did the GP update force. That's why I signed out and signed back in. That is a force of that policy flow. But, I mean, I've run into situations where it just refuses to do it. So just reboot your Windows 10 machine. And now those two policies are configured for me. But you, again, different policy. Disable guest. That's what I want in your policy. Not these. But after that, you're done. It seems like a lot, but there was a lot of waiting on it, and there was a lot of explanation on it. So this video is going to be way longer than the actual process of you doing it, as long as you know the answers to flow on through. So that'll do it, though. That'll do it. From start to finish, Active Directory, domain controller, promote that guy, authorize everything, get some policies in, and you're boot scooting at that point. All right, so I'm going to kill it here.